Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the final day of the 2021 AFCEA Rocky Mountain Cyberspace Symposium presented by Deloitte. I do have one admin comment before we get started with this morning's panel. If you've been with us all week, you know that we are raffling off an iPad every day for anyone who manages to interact, to get entered into a drawing for anyone that manages to interact with all of our sponsor and presenter booths in the virtual exhibit symposium. Happy to say we had 6 people actually make that threshold yesterday, and the lucky winner out of those 6 is Miss Heather Lowry, and we'll be contacting her to make sure we can get her iPad. If you didn't make the threshold or were one of the 6 that didn't make it, didn't get your name selected yesterday, you got one more day to go through and hit all those booths again. And please, it's important to support our sponsors and our exhibitors because they're a good piece of what makes this possible every year for us. And that money goes right back into our STEM support. So it's very important for us, and we appreciate you supporting them in their booths, especially this year with the virtual format. So encourage you to do that during our breaks. This morning we're going to shift a little bit and get the joint perspective on our topic of convergence this year. And our first panel host is uniquely positioned to help us bring that perspective to the conversation this morning. Lieutenant General Robert Skinner is the new Director of the Defense Information Systems Agency and Commander of the Joint Force Headquarters Department of Defense Information Network. He's been a longtime friend of the show and has commanded at squadron, group, wing, numbered Air Force levels, and if that wasn't impressive enough, prior to this he was the Director of Command, Control, Communications, and Cyber at U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. So as again I said, longtime friend of the show. So let me turn it over to the General and his panel and say, welcome, sir. Thanks for being with us today, and really looking forward to your conversation, sir. Over to you.
All right. Thanks, Rich, and thanks everyone. A special thanks to Rich and Lieutenant Colonel Parker, Vanessa Johnson for putting on a great show. I'll say again, just as expected, and we look forward to kind of bringing a little combatant commander perspective. When I was first asked to be part of this panel, I was out at the U.S. Indo-PACOM, and fortunately, I've had the great honor to being part of the JFHQ DODN and the DISA team. I'll tell you in the questions. Happy to answer questions related to JFHQ DODN and DISA, but I don't want that to take away from the panel and the focus on the combatant commands and the joint world. We'll have plenty of time for questions on this, but again, happy to answer some of them, but I'd like us to focus on the combatant commands and what is happening out in the combatant command world. I will tell you, I love the theme of this, power of convergence. When I first started thinking about this, I thought back to my childhood. Right, and I'm thinking, what are some examples of power of convergence? And the first one that comes to mind is, the Three Musketeers, right? All for one and one for all. And then you got the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, right? Who take their belts and they throw them up and they say it's morphin time. But then I think the greatest one of all is kind of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? The Cowabunga, and in all of those instances, each one of them, as they say that. Each one individual strengths come together and they're more powerful than each individual. And that's what I kind of thought about when we talk power of convergence. And I'll say that kind of rolls into today, right? It's how are we bringing the capabilities together, the domains together, converging them so that we have the upper hand when it comes to schema maneuver in support of our combatant commands, whether it's a strategic and or global nature or something that is more regional. And what as I was kind of thinking about this panel, I like to call it the 3 Ds, right? There's data, there's diversity, and there's digital modernization. And I think those 3 together, which goes along with time, technology, and processes that we've thought tried and true, those are kind of the comments that I'm going to start out with, and then I'll turn it over to the panelists to kind of walk through theirs. I will tell you, I understand, and I've heard that data is kind of the big discussion in this panel, and I should say in this symposium. I will tell you, I look at data as the 21st century center of gravity. If you own the data, if you understand the data, and you can leverage the data, then you have the decision space ahead of the adversary and ahead of your competition because each and every day we are in strategic competition. And I know our panel members will talk about strategic competition as well as the full spectrum of potential conflict. And so I think as we kind of walk through that, data is at the heart of everything that we do. Data is at the heart of every scheme of maneuver, and data is at the heart of every advantage that we have as we go forward. And so all you got to do is look back to Colonel Ward's strategic attack framework, and to me, data is at the center of that as we kind of continue to try and harvest that. I'll tell you, the second, I'll say, just as equally important is the diversity, right? We have a very diverse force, and you can look at this panel, right? We have a diverse panel of different services, different genders, different commands. And I think the ability to leverage the diversity that we have, and it's not just that, right? It's diversity of thought, it's diversity of background, it's diversity of experiences that really put us ahead of the adversary. It puts us ahead of the competition each and every day. And I've, General Brown has heard me say this a few times. It's not just us on this panel or us in this symposium. Every single person needs to be, in my eyes, a data Jedi of some sorts, right? We have the old saying of, from a security forces standpoint, from a force protection, where every single individual is a sensor. Well, as we kind of continue to mature this force, and we continue to get into the future, every single individual has to understand data and has to understand how that data impacts their day-to-day operations. Because whether you're trying to optimize or whether you're trying to, any number of ways that you're trying to optimize the force, optimize what you do each and every day, optimize interoperability, optimize the partnerships, that the diversity is at the heart of that, and you have to understand the data piece. I say that the third part is the digital modernization. And this is where I think industry can really help. It's how do we leverage technology as a solution to get after the problem sets? And it's not just a tool here or there. And it's not just, it is a holistic look at a capability that can handle multiple items. So I don't have 15 tools across the landscape as we move forward. Because combatant commands, services, organize, train, and equip. Combatant commands leverage that. And the more complex that those solutions are, the less effective for the combatant command, and less effective that combatant command is going to be in being able to command and control their forces. So I ask industry's help to come out of the dugout, walk to home plate, and help us score some runs so we can get ahead of the adversary, stay ahead of the adversary as we look at strategic competition. You notice I did not talk JADC2. I did not talk ABMS. I did not talk MPE, Mission Partner Environment. Happy to talk those. But I think in order for those to be successful, you have to have the right data environment, you have to have the right diversity, and you have to have the right digital modernization, or those things won't be effective at all. And the combatant commands need JADC2. They need a mission partner environment as an integrated solution as they move forward. I'll stop there and I'll turn it over to General Brown, who I've had the honor to work with very deeply over the last year out at Indo-PACOM, and I'll turn it over to her to kind of give some insights from the Indo-PACOM theater. Over.
Hey, good morning, sir, and aloha. That was especially for you, sir, and team. And so thanks for the opportunity to participate in today's panel. So, I thought it was best if I began by briefly describing the Indo-PACOM landscape. And that is beyond the beautiful beaches and abundance of sunshine. So it's, and as well as the concept behind our strategic initiatives in Indo-Pacific. Indo-PACOM's AOR, or Area of Responsibility, covers more of the globe than any of the other geographic combatant commands. It also shares borders with all the other 5 geographic combatant commands. And when we look at the functional commands, big consumer of space and the strategic assets as well as cyber. The Indo-PACOM region is an absolute vital driver of the global economy. It includes the world's busiest international sea lanes and 9 of the 10 largest ports. The region is heavily militarized. If you're not aware, 7 of the world's 10 largest standing militaries and 5 of the world's declared nuclear nations. The Indo-PACOM region is the United States priority theater. Just want to foot stomp that. It's the priority theater because it is the single most consequential region for America's future. Indo-PACOM depends on the collective capabilities. So when we start talking about the joint and allied partners, we depend on those collective capabilities across the joint force, our allies and partners to address the challenges, ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific. Just a few facts for you. There's 36 nations comprised in the Asia Pacific region and are home to more than 50% of the world's population, and as well as 3,000 different languages. Given these conditions, the strategic complexity facing this region is unique, and it is clear that whatever we do, we must do it in cooperation with our allies and partners. General Skinner spoke about it when we talk about data. Key to our bilateral and multilateral relationships are communication, information sharing, interoperability, as well as, central to all that is data. Most recently, the SecDef characterized China as our #1 pace and challenge. The speed at which they are modernizing and expanding places the imperative on us to slow down their clock. And that has probably been heard multiple times from Admiral Davison in his different engagements. And we want to slow down their clock so we can regain the advantage for the long term. So just to briefly describe the Indo-PACOM strategy to regain this advantage, it's based on 4 key focus areas: increasing joint force lethality, enhancing design and posture, which will, with an agile and distributed joint force that is designed to deter and deny our adversaries their objectives in the first and second island chains. We're also looking to strengthen our allies and partners. Strong alliances and partnerships represent the most essential component of the U.S. national power beyond our nation's economic and military strength. And this will require us to establish a network of compatible and interoperable allies and partners who are willing and able to protect their sovereignty from coercion. Additionally, we'll be modernizing our exercises, experimentation, and innovation programs. And this is really, probably one of the most significant changes that Admiral Davison has brought to this command in the last 3 years. He has really operationalized our exercises. There is not an exercise in the Indo-PACOM AOR from the service component level that doesn't have a joint flavor and includes our allies and partners. And we're trying to maximize those exercises to really start experimenting and innovating with new capabilities to really enable us to achieve this concept of the joint all-domain command and control. And sir, I'll stop there and I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you for letting me make those comments.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Denise. And now we'll turn it over to Mr. Ruiz, better known as LDR, who's been a great partner and a great friend for many years, and taking United States Strategic Command to the next level. Liz, over to you.
Great. Thanks very much, sir. So good morning, good afternoon. I'm not sure we've got anybody good evening, but at any rate, greetings from Offutt Air Force Base, Omaha, Nebraska, the geographic center of the country, the home of United States Strategic Command, in our brand new command and control facility, which we've emplaced about a year ago. Couple of thoughts that I will tell you from a strategic command perspective. And I'm really happy to have the opportunity to speak to the audience today. But from a strategic command perspective, yeah, we're not a geographic command, but instead we consider, and Admiral Richard considered us to be a global command. Our mission is far-reaching, overarching, and global in nature, supporting certainly the geographic combatant commands in their missions, but also many whole of government initiatives as well. So I wanted to just start my talk off a little bit just by reading to you a paragraph from a recent article that was published in proceedings. And the title of the article is Forging 21st Century Strategic Deterrence. The article is written by Admiral Richard and a host of experts. It was published in February. And just a little bit of an idea of what we're facing here at U.S. Strategic Command and what the nation is facing as a whole when we start talking about strategic deterrence. So one of the paragraphs says as follows: faced with Russia and China growing threats and gray zone actions, the United States must take action today to position itself for the future. We must start by acknowledging that our most fundamental assumption that strategic deterrence will hold, even throughout crisis and conflict, is going to be tested in ways not seen before. This assumption is the foundation on which we build strategies, plans, and capabilities. But unfortunately, our opponents invested in nuclear and strategic capabilities designed to constrain U.S. actions, test our alliances, and if necessary, escalate past us to include nuclear use. There is a real possibility that a regional crisis with Russia or China could escalate quickly to a conflict involving nuclear weapons if they perceived a conventional loss would threaten the regime or state. Consequently, the United States military must shift its principal assumption from nuclear employment is not possible to nuclear employment is a very real possibility, and act to meet and deter that reality. We cannot approach nuclear deterrence the same way. It must be tailored and evolve for the dynamic environment we face. So that's just one of the articles, one of the paragraphs out of that particular article. And the big picture here, when we talk about convergence, we're really talking about convergence in the joint arena. No longer can we think of warfare or conflict as first it's going to be in a particular AOR, and then when things get really tough, we'll call the Stratcom team and have them bring a couple of those weapons over there and help employ that. This is a whole of government, whole of combatant command, whole of Department of Defense conflict that we face going forward. We need to think about things more in terms of global fight, a global situation where there's integrated operations and integrated effects. And that's the way that we're practicing. That's the way we're changing the way that Stratcom looks at warfare, as well as the way the department is looking at warfare. So that's the first area of convergence. Couple more areas of convergence I'd like to talk to you about, and then maybe an area where industry can help us. The second area of convergence is, we've talked a little bit about it already, is data. Now, we at Stratcom are very early in the data path here because the way that we're pursuing warfare has always been very isolated for Stratcom. We are in the point right now of opening up and leveraging data, leveraging many more enterprise-wide solutions, mission partner environment, and JAD, SADC2 are a couple of our favorites out here, as well as cloud computing. Very, very new for U.S. Strategic Command. But the point of that is that this is not new technology. And for us to think globally about leveraging data as the new oil, or leveraging data as was quoted in Babylon 5, he who controls the information controls the world. That's really the perspective we're taking here as Stratcom. So better understanding where our data sources are, better understanding the algorithms that we could use to leverage those particular data sources to provide common information and a common picture, not only here at Stratcom, but throughout the Department of Defense as we go forward in a global integrated operations world that we all face. And the final area of convergence I wanted to talk about is talent and the war for talent. And the fact that we are all looking for those folks who can be the data ninjas, the experts in talent, the experts in war fighting, the experts in IT from wherever they are. So for example, I like to tell folks that we at Stratcom, especially after the pandemic, are leveraging a come from where you are construct. So for example, when we started responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, there were 7 people at Stratcom who could telework. 7. Within 10 days after the pandemic was declared, we had 4,000 people on NIPR telework. We did that through a couple of ways. First of all, our C2F that I mentioned briefly at the beginning was designed to be able to be flexible and to be able to leverage data from anywhere and provide that teleworking capability to Stratcom. So we did that very fast. The other reason that I say we did that is that we had a group of people here who were very forward-leaning, very forward-looking. And so since we've been able to do that with telework, especially during the pandemic, we're asking ourselves, so what's next? How can we do this better? We started teleworking at Nipper. We now have a mobile SIPR capability, and we're deploying over 4,000 tablets to our folks here at Stratcom as we speak. So those are the three areas of convergence that I see: convergence in joint warfighting, convergence in data, and convergence in talent, where we corporately need to work together, not only within the department, with our industry partners. And if I could have one thing to ask of industry as we go forward here, knowing that those are some of the challenges that we face, knowing that we're going to face challenges in working together globally, leveraging more and more data sources and talent from anywhere. Really appreciate your thoughts and your ideas and best practices on how you've done it. We know industries out there, they've been doing this in many places, many years. We know that there are global call centers, for example. How do we take that great lessons that you have from industry perspective and leverage them for us in the global warfight? So with that, I'll turn it back to General Skinner, and thanks again for giving me the opportunity to speak. Over.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks for those great words from Stratcom. We were going to have Brigadier General Matos, the U.S. Space Command J6. Unfortunately, he was unable to make it today. But our last, but definitely not least, panel member is Brigadier General Michelle Hayworth. She's out at the J6 at U.S. Transcom. I've known her for many years. We worked very closely last time at 24th Air Force, and so look forward to her words. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you very much, sir, and greetings from the cornfields of Illinois. So I must say, it's wish we could have been in Colorado Springs in person, but it's a pleasure to be here with everyone virtually this morning. So like my other panel members, I'd like to start with talking a little bit about United States Transportation Command. So this command exists as a warfighting combat command to project and sustain combat power at a time and place of the nation's choosing. And with 85% of the force elements stationed in the continental United States, our ability to do that is certainly a strategic competitive advantage for the United States. As one of 11 combatant commands, Transcom is responsible for operating the Defense Transportation System and integrating the Joint Deployment and Distribution Enterprise, or better known as the JDDE. These unified command plan tasks are executed through 3 component commands and 1 major subordinate command. So we have the Army's Military Surface Deployment and Distribution Command, the Navy's Military Sea Lift Command, the Air Force's Air Mobility Command, and the Joint Enabling Capabilities Command. And Transcom key mission areas include airlift, air refueling, aeromedical evacuation, sea lift, and domestic rail and motor freight. So I'm sure it's no surprise that the DoD's ability to project military forces is inextricably linked to our commercial industry partners. They provide critical transportation capacity and global networks to meet our day-to-day and our wartime requirements. Transcom also manages multiple industry emergency preparedness programs, including the Civil Reserve Air Fleet, the Voluntary Intermodal Sea Lift Agreement, the Strategic Seaport Program, the Strategic Corridor Rail Network, and the Strategic Highway Network. So as you can imagine, in day-to-day operations, volumes of data on routes, nodes, and transportation capacity, whether it's air, land, and sea conveyances, is generated. And with the nation's increased focus on strategic competition, the department realizes that data can be as useful as a weapon system. And at Transcom, we definitely know that the foundation of our success is data. So one of the command's priorities is to advance decision-making by capitalizing on big data to facilitate machine learning, artificial intelligence, and advanced analytics. Last October, we're proud to say that we launched our Unclassified Enterprise Data and Analytics Environment, or EDAE. So it's going to provide decision makers at every level of mobility enterprise with data that's visible, accessible, linked, and secure, allowing decisions to be made quickly regarding the movement of critical logistics. The command's Joint Distribution Process Analysis Center, or JDPAC, is also using this data to analyze the global posture of the enterprise to include its present state as well as its past patterns to create operational advantages and increased efficiencies. JDPAC is staffed with military analysts and data scientists who help Transcom solve complex problems by transforming data into meaningful information. And they've been conducting analysis using artificial intelligence for some time now. So what we're now doing is we're moving this work into the EDAE, and JDPAC has a number of use cases underway, such as how transportation demand stimulates the mobility enterprise. And I'll tell you, as the nation moves more and more to different deployment concepts like the dynamic force employment, actually transportation command is going up. And so JDPAC is doing some analysis on how that demand is stimulating the mobility enterprise. There also has a use case to look for ways to influence expedited delivery. And the most complex of challenges, how to shift priorities to scale to a high-end fight. So in parallel to our data efforts, we're also increasing technological capabilities and strengthening overall adoption of enterprise systems with our digital modernization efforts and our move to a modernized target architecture. And like many across the department, this architecture takes advantage of advancements in secure controls and coding, cloud services, and containerization. So I thought I'd take just a few minutes to talk a little bit about some of our cloud efforts. In fiscal year 20, we completed the migration of the 12 programs of record that are in our Surface portfolio, as well as the migration of 6 systems in our joint planning and execution portfolio. And we moved these 18 systems into our Transcom unclassified cloud. This fiscal year, we've begun the migration of the first 2 systems from our air operations planning and execution portfolio. And of note, when I mentioned that last year we moved our Surface portfolio programs into the cloud, we primarily lifted and shifted these programs at the time due to a couple of different things. For example, one was the St. Louis deck here was closing, and so we had to move those systems out of there. So now this year, we're continuing to activities to refactor all of those programs for cloud optimization. This year, we're also finalizing our Nipper cloud evolution, and we'll also be establishing a classified cloud environment for our programs of records to migrate into, as well as to enable JDPAC to conduct some classified analytic efforts. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say that none of these actions would be possible without the incredible teammates we have. So we know that our collective strength depends on our people, which means not only professionally developing them, but also embracing diversity and inclusion. And as some of the other panel members have touched on, new ways of thinking are critical, and we all need a diverse workforce that brings new thought to our complex problem sets. However, we also know that gaining diversity is not always as easy as we'd like. So as a nation, the reality is that there's not enough professionals to fill the demand. I think we've all heard some of the staggering numbers regarding cybersecurity professionals in this country, not to mention shortages in other specialties like data science. So I know there's been a lot of dialogue on the issue and actions taken to improve diversity with academia, government, and in the private sector. But to be fully successful, I think we all realize we all have to remain committed to increasing diversity and supporting the next generation of talent. And finally, I'll just close with saying that I'm happy to share that last year at Transcom, we activated an Inclusion and Diversity Council that's chaired by our deputy commander and consists of voting members from across the headquarters who represent a cross-section of our workforce. So through various efforts, the council, they're staying actively engaged in how to build and sustain an inclusive and diverse environment. It's a good start, but we have much more still to do. And so, sir, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. And I hope some great comments. I hope those comments have generated, we've already got a few questions, and I hope that there's some more questions on the way. Got some very good alignment with the different combatant commands. All have, I'll say, similar experiences and similar challenges, but there's some unique challenges based on the threat that they are aligned with and or the threat that they are tackling. So with that, the first question that came in is, what has been the biggest difference in perspective regarding information technology and cyber capability delivery from the service? They mentioned U.S. Air Force, but I think of any service, to the combatant command. What is the biggest lesson that the combatant command staff can learn from the services and vice versa? I'll let General Brown take that one, because she has had a lot of great experiences with the executive agent from the Navy in supporting U.S. Indo-PACOM.
Okay, thanks, sir. So I want to make sure I understand the question again. If you could just restate it one more time for me.
Sure. What has been the biggest difference in perspective regarding information technology and cyber capability delivery from the service to the combatant command? What is the biggest lesson that the combatant command staff can learn from the services and vice versa? And I'll let you think about it for a second. Here's what I would offer as one item. Understanding that the services organize, train, and equip And the services are really focused on service capabilities that then are presented to the combatant commands. The more joint that the services can leverage and use and think about, the greater it is for the combatant commands. Because, and this will drive into the next question that we have that I'll ask. And it's, you know, the combatant commands, they all work together. The services all work together. And while we have a lot of joint program offices, we have a lot of joint programs, the more that the individual service programs can be joint, the better from a combatant command standpoint. Because at the end of the day, the combatant commanders are really focused on how do I best command and control our forces, whether it's in competition, crisis, and or conflict, and how can we best maneuver our forces, have the best force posture for the future. And that's integrating all of the different services, I'll say, as well as the agencies that are in their respective domains and spheres of activity. But with that, I'll turn over to General Brown and see what she has to offer from Indo-PACOM.
Okay, sure. So, I would start with, and, if I would go on to what you said, sir, I think at the end of the day, the most important thing that we've learned from our services and the IT and the communication capabilities they deliver is joint has to be baked in from the beginning. So if I was to, or built in the beginning, either way, but if I was to go back and just look at our headquarters, our theater here, every component, each service component has their own IT. We are our executive agent delivering that IT, right? So Army, Air Force, et cetera. And then even in this combatant command, our executive agent to deliver our IT is the Navy. But our combatant commander or our members couldn't go from this headquarters to the PACAF AOC and be able to seamlessly log in to their system and access their data, access their email, etc. They would have to have an account built on that services network. And so that poses a significant challenge in this theater, especially as you start looking at pushing out and doing different exercises that we were talking about. One of the efforts that we have underway is something called Indo-PACnet. And the intent of Indo-PACnet is really to have this joint warfighting network that is delivered on a single device and able to access the multiple domains, be it, or multiple enclaves, be it SIPR, NIPR, or an MPE environment, a Citrix environment. And that's not, today, we don't have that capability. So when we do exercises, every service is standing up their own network. It's the same way we've been operating for years. Every service goes out there, they establish their own network, their own battle command systems, they kludge them together, and then the combatant commands are trying to integrate and correlate all that data to be able to conduct command and control and operations in a combat environment. And until we're able to really design our IT and our communication capabilities joint from the beginning, we're going to continue to have challenges with interoperability amongst the joint force, not to mention our allies and partners. I'm not sure if that fully answered the question, but that's my look on it, sir.
Okay, great. Liz, Michelle, would you like to offer anything, or we want to go to the next question?
So if I could maybe just offer a couple thoughts from a strategic command perspective. So agree that joint being baked in is exactly where we want to go, but we also have got to consider cybersecurity and performance in that as well. So let me paint you a little bit of a picture here at Stratcom. If I just talk about three of the networks that we use, NIPR, SIPR, and JWICS. SIPR is our designated mission network out here, and we also leverage JWICS for many of our intelligence aspects of the network. We also have some unique mission systems that are Stratcom unique mission systems, and of course we have NIPRNet. But if I look at NIPRNet, we're leveraging many of the DISA-provided capabilities, enterprise-wide capabilities on NIPRNet. We've just stood up our own JWICS node here at Stratcom to make sure from our mission perspective that we can continue to operate on a very bad day. And so while we want to be able to leverage those kinds of things from an enterprise perspective, not only does it have to be joint, it has to be cyber secure, and we have some unique requirements for endurability and those kinds of things. So I think it's important for us to consider that too. Not only do we need to have joint baked in, but we need to have mission requirements baked in and not bolted on as well. And the final point I'll make is from a SIPR perspective, we own, operate, and manage our own SIPRNet. We leverage some enterprise provided capabilities such as Defense Enterprise Email on SIPRNet. But other than that, different than Offutt Air Force Base, we have our own separate and distinct SIPRNet enclave here because it's our particular mission system. So would we like to be able to perform that function more economically and leverage more of an enterprise-wide capability? Sure. But we've got to make sure that we've got capabilities in place that can, as I mentioned, really function on a really bad day. Thanks.
Sir, I think what I would add, so a little bit about Transcom. So we operate under Transportation Capital Working Fund. So we are a little bit different. So while the Air Force is our executive agent for Transcom, we do own, operate our own NIPRNet, and we're actually right today in the process of transitioning users to the Transcom SIPRNet. So it's a little bit different from us, but I would echo, right, the need for everything to be interoperable and things like that. I think a little bit of difference for us too is because of our mission set and having to work so closely with our commercial industry partners. A lot of what we do is on the NIPRNet. Of course, command and control is on SIPR. But I think the biggest thing for us is just the ability to be able to communicate in collaboration across all of that. So I think from a services perspective, we're interested in how they're moving forward with their Office 365 environments. So we're getting ready. We'll be joining the DISA tenant when we move to Office 365. Zero Trust, I think as the department moves forward on Zero Trust, we're watching what the services are doing with their Office 365 and Zero Trust. Here at Transcom, we're also one of the pilots with partnering with Cyber Command and NSA and the DoD CIO's office on standing up a Zero Trust security model on our SIPRNet that we're rolling out. So I think I think the biggest thing is just that we all kind of work together and that we are driving towards the same at least concept. Same thing on the data side. So I think we're a little bit further in some of our data stuff than some others, but so we're very closely monitoring the DoD data strategy and are part of the some of the data discussions that are happening under the JADC2 cross-functional team as well.
Okay, thank you. And General Hayward, since you kind of partially touched on this, one of the questions was, what is the biggest challenge facing U.S. Transportation Command with your external carrier customer base from a security perspective? So I suspect it's the day-to-day workings with your commercial carriers and those commercial companies. What kind of keeps you up at night from a security perspective?
Yeah, that really doesn't keep me up at night. And we talk about that a lot. So as you can imagine, for what Transportation Command does, our attack surface is pretty big. We are our own cybersecurity service provider for what we call Area of Operation Transportation, or AO Tango. But again, a lot of what our mission, it runs on the DoDIN as well as in the commercial space. But what's of most importance, right, is the ability to be able to command and control. So that's really, from a cybersecurity perspective, is what we're focused on the most if we're going to expend energy and resources, is making sure we can preserve our ability to command and control. Now, that doesn't mean the other working with industry partners and the commercial networks they work on is not important. But, and we do have things in place. For example, we put in cybersecurity language into our contracts that regarding 110 of the NIST cybersecurity controls, for example. And all of our service providers do have to provide annual cybersecurity self-assessments against those 110 controls. But we know that's all voluntary. There's no enforcement mechanism from there. So, so because of that, the way we've done our acquisition, we have a lot of resiliency built in, whether it's working with commercial partners, whether in air, land, and sea, that we feel that, if there was a significant cyber event with one of our partners, that we have enough resiliency built in that we would be able to work around that. So hope that answered the question.
Yes, it did. Great, thanks. And this is for Liz. How about you? How does the panel view bigger bandwidth evolving for JADC2 through JEDI, DIOS, and MilCloud, et cetera?
So as far as the bigger bandwidth is concerned, I mean, it's you know, from a Stratcom perspective, and I would guess from everybody wants bigger bandwidth, right? I think the bigger bandwidth is good, greater storage is great, but at the end of the day, it comes with a price. So do we have the resilience that we need to make sure that the bigger bandwidth is going to be there when we need it? Do we have the resilience to be able to access our data from anywhere, globally from wherever it is? And is the bigger bandwidth secure? Do we have that cybersecurity baked in and not bolted on? So from a Stratcom perspective, we look at the bigger bandwidth not only from our basic administrative and C2 networks that you're talking about, but also from a mission perspective, the nuclear command control enterprise, the NC2 enterprise nuclear command and control systems that we're looking at improving for the future. So many of you may know that many of our NC3 systems at Stratcom are very old, very antiquated, and we say we've got cybersecurity by antiquity, because they're so old that cybersecurity wasn't a thing back then. So with that, as we improve and go to the next generation of NC3, how do we ensure that cybersecurity is baked in and bolted on, and we have that greater bandwidth so that we can be more functional going forward from a mission perspective as well? But at the end of the day, it's all about access, cybersecurity, and resilience for us.
Okay, thoughts from the other two?
Hey, sir, I'll chime in. If I could hit going back to what Michelle had answered earlier about the security of the commercial assets. When I look at how INDOPACOM depends and leverages those commercial access on this big ocean, one of the concerns is, how do we assure their command and control at the commercial level and being able to interoperate with us? And really what we're finding is, and we all know this, is to be able to secure these commercial assets that are a national resource is going to take a whole of government and a whole nation approach. It goes beyond what DoD can do. And I think that's something that we have to continue to evolve and mature and work with our other government partners and our commercial partners to ensure there's unity of effort to get after this assured capability for us. And then if I can go on to the next question about the increased availability of bandwidth, I'm reminded of Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. And so we've all had this experience through our multiple deployments. The more bandwidth you provide, the quicker it gets eaten up. And so we have this increased availability of data that's really going to change warfighting in a multi-domain environment. But it's not just this increase of data availability, it's knowing how to correlate the data instantaneously so that we have a full understanding of what it means and can share that insight with the people we will fight alongside. So we can have these large pipes, significant bandwidth, but we have to be able to understand the data to share the data. And so that's where I become concerned when we talk about the bandwidth, is not having a good understanding of the data that we have available to us. And we've always had an abundance of data collected, but that ever-growing resource will now be fully weaponized across the joint force. And that's all I have, sir.
Okay, thank you. And one thing I'd offer to the crowd is, I think in 5 to 10 years, bandwidth is going to be a commodity. I think if you look at the proliferation of capabilities across the board, I think there's just going to be so much available that I think it becomes a commodity. So then you think about, okay, so how am I able to package? How am I able to make sure that the edge devices and edge processing occurs? Because while it may be a commodity, there may be certain times where it's contested, and you may be in a certain point where you may not have access to it. And so looking from an industry standpoint is, how do we continue to, while we're providing these central capabilities, through JEDI, through DIOS, and as the question mentioned, MilCloud and other cloud offerings, there's a tactical edge piece, and how do we make sure that from a processing standpoint, from a replication standpoint, that we're still able to maintain operations despite some potential breakage of connectivity. I do think from a number standpoint, again, bandwidth I think is going to be a commodity, and so the focus is more on the data and the encrypting of that information, because I think encryption is a significant piece of the puzzle that is usually not thought about when you initially talk about capabilities, and that goes anywhere from aircraft to talking to ships to information systems that are in different applications that are talking. So I think that's the thing I'd offer to everyone. Okay, the next question, which should be a softball for either of you three, and whoever would like to jump on this one first, is what are some of the top IT cyber-related challenges at each of your combatant commands? So what are some of the top IT cyber-related challenges that you're facing on a day-to-day basis? I think each one of you could talk about this, so whoever wants to open the
Sure,
mic.
I'll chime in.
Okay.
You haven't been here and experienced it. So IndoPACOM, our IT is provided as IT as a service and platform as a service, desktop as a service. It is that is how the Navy has contracted to deliver IT at headquarters. And really, part of our challenge with that is responsiveness. When we've outsourced this, it's the responsiveness to the combatant command's requirements. The other challenge we have, and Liz was talking about this earlier, is we have this enterprise that supports us. However, it's mainly for administrative data. We've had to set up separate networks, SIPR and NIPR, to be able to use our mission applications. And so now we're both managing networks as well as being a consumer. So really, if I was to capture the biggest challenge we have in the IT realm is how to be a demanding customer to ensure the communications that are being provided to this headquarters is in support of a warfighting command. I talked briefly what we're trying to move towards with the single device. Depending on the day, you could have 3 or 4 systems sitting on your desk, between SIPR, NIPR, Centrix, and JWICS. And so what we're trying to move to is this multi-enclave client, this single device to be able to access these multiple enclaves. With those multiple devices, multiple enclaves also results into multiple phones. I'm reminded about a story when I was in Iraq, and this was back in 2004, to where the Corps deputy commander, he pulls the brigade commander, myself, into his office, and he goes, "I want to show you something. I have all these phones on my desk," and he starts picking them up. And then he looks around, he turns around to us and says, "And not a single one of them works." And so, the challenge there is the more devices we have, the more complexity we have in being able to manage those capabilities for our commanders. And I'll leave it at that, sir. I didn't even get on my soapbox. I'm just saying.
Liz Michelle?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. I mentioned we've moved into a brand new command and control facility. So this is a command and control facility. We at Offutt Air Force Base, if you're not familiar with the geography here, we're right next to the Missouri River. About 2010, the Missouri River flooded and threatened the assets here at Offutt Air Force Base. So after that, there was a huge hue and cry to, oh my gosh, we've got to build a new STRATCOM headquarters. It's going to be this mamma jamma command and control facility. It's going to have all the great new capabilities, new technology. That was in 2012, 2014 timeframe. And we have put those things in place, those technologies in place, like we're talking about, a single phone, a single capability on your desk to be able to get to multiple phones. That was one of the things we designed into the C2 facility, as well as a single capability to get to multiple networks. And it briefs well, and it looks good on paper. And I'm sure that was a great idea. So fast forward to 2017, I guess it was 2018. Anyway, we had another flood here at Offutt Air Force Base, but this was the flood of the century, and it actually destroyed 60% of the base. So the 55th Wing was really in bad straits. The only one of the few buildings that was still available at Offutt and fully functional was the Stratcom headquarters building, which is on a hill. And because of that, the commander said, we are very good partners with the 55th Wing. I know we've got a command and control facility that's still in development. I know you've probably got 18 months work ahead, but you know what? You got 6 months to get 4,000 people in that headquarters building. So we picked everything up. And as you might imagine, there was a huge sense of urgency to run and get into the headquarters building as quickly as we could. So all of the design features that we thought about and actually operationalizing them, that has been our biggest challenge in the last 2 years here at Offutt Air Force Base. So it not only was it designed several years ago, so you've got the challenge with having logistics sustainment problems, but you also have the challenge with, as everybody knows, the last thing that's delivered is typically the documentation. And we didn't have it when we were forced to move into this building. So trying to get a hold of configuration control, trying to actually operationalize those systems and getting, the theory of the single instrument working across all environments actually working. Same thing with the computers. We've really struggled through that over the last 18 to 24 months. So if you think about that, to me, I guess the biggest point is it's not just the theory of getting there, which is all good, but actually the operational implementation of that and delivering of a capability faster to the warfighter. The reason that this building was later than we had anticipated, and we were in it quicker than we anticipated, was because of the difficulty that we have with acquisition system, acquiring the complex weapon systems that we have, this one-of-a-kind facility for very many reasons. But as we go forward with our industry partners, not just looking at what's within the realm of the possible from a technology perspective, but no kidding, actually implementing it on the time frame required by the warfighters. Over.
So what I would say for us, it's not so much, I think, the IT challenges. As I mentioned at the beginning, so advanced decision making is one of our priorities, but another one right after warfighting readiness is cyber domain mission assurance. So I think for us, it's really how do we continue, again, for our AO that we're the CSSP for, how do we continue to improve our detect and respond ability? Because as we all know, with cyber adversaries, it's a cat and mouse game. And as we continue to increase our security posture, they find ways to work around that. So that's one. And I think the other one that General Lyons always talks about a lot, he's very concerned about what he calls a little bit of the supply chain. And so I think the SolarWinds incident, right, is a perfect example of, from a technology provider perspective. I mean, this is a case where a pretty determined adversary was able to, build a backdoor into versions of SolarWinds. And so we've been watching that a little bit, as the open hearings have been both on the House side and the Senate side the last week of February. So it'll be interesting to see what the nation does with moving forward and the partnerships between, I think, the federal government and industry on those things. But for us too, right, where it also talks about from the supply chain, a lot of our coding for our mobility systems is actually done by contractors. And so how do we know that when we get the code for some of those key command and control systems, that is going to be good when it gets to us? So I mean, we're working some DevSecOps things within the command, but those are a couple of the continuous questions that General Lyons always asks about.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. I'd offer a couple other things that in regards to some of the IT challenges. And Liz mentioned this a little bit, mobility. I will tell you, the force today is not as mobile as it needs to be. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about a combatant command, if you're talking about service, and mobile in all of the different and right classification levels to make sure that our senior leaders across the board, members of our force, are able to effectively communicate, effectively command and control, no matter where they are at. And I think that's something that I think industry can really help with. It doesn't mean that we're going fully away from the brick and mortar offices and things like that. But how do you have alignment and harmony, I'll say, with the ability to command and control your force no matter where you're at. The pandemic really taught, I would say, more than just the Department of Defense and more than just the combatant commands. It taught everyone that you have to be mobile and you have to have those capabilities. And there's a lot of the haves and the have-nots right now in relation to the ability to do 100% of your mission no matter where you are at. And so I think from an industry standpoint, your continued help on that. The other part that I would offer is I'll say the little irritants that come up. And these are the process actions that just, they're not fully automated. You have individuals doing a lot of manual work still. Yes, you'd be surprised at how much there actually is still a lot of that going on. And so how do we leverage, the robotic process automation, RPA, right? Bringing that into the fold with the combatant commands to, I'll say, take care of the irritants so that the focus can really be on the command and control, the forces, getting after the strategic competition in their area of responsibility, I think is really important. And if you can take care of some of those irritants that continue to pop up or that take a significant amount of time to where you have to have more forces and more of your personnel doing those actions and activities versus their primary duties, whether it's a J5 planner, J3 from a current and or future ops or from a 6 standpoint. That's what I would offer. Okay. This is one, it's about the sharing of information. Okay. So you're at the mercy of my ability to find the question and okay. How are combatant commands working to share with each other their efforts in data convergence, AI, and cloud efforts? How will the combatant commands work together in the future in regards to these areas and or other areas? So I think I would offer to the panel, how are you working together on a day-to-day basis to get after the technological issues in support of your combatant commands that, as we've seen, and even the vice chairman mentioned, the integration and the seamlessness between combatant commands, because everything's global now, almost. How are you working together to satisfy both your mission, but knowing that your mission kind of expands globally if you are a geographic combatant command, which I know there's only one of them on here, but I'd offer that up to General Hayworth.
So I think I think on a day-to-day basis, I know from our perspective, I don't think it's happening that much on a day-to-day basis, but I will tell you that, we do have quarterly sessions, monthly, or we try to think monthly sessions with all the combatant command J6s to talk about different issues. There's also quarterly sessions with the Joint Staff J6, for example. And so a lot of times before those sessions, we'll get together and we'll come up with some common themes that we want to work together, from a department perspective on. I think some of the other avenues in the way we do that is, as I mentioned before, there's the JADC2 cross-functional team. So I think all of us are participants in that, in the data summits that are starting to come out of that. There's also, General Skinner's organization hosts, we host quarterly the Joint Force or the DODN Principals Boards, right? Those are another opportunities for us to have a conversation. So again, from a day-to-day perspective, not that much, but I think, there's definitely touch points as we move, on regular occurring basis for us to talk about different issues and ensure that we're going either from the DoD CIO side of the house or over on the Joint Staff J6 of the side of the house with common issues and things that we needed the department to work for the benefit of all of us.
Hey, sir, I would add, in addition to the venues that Michelle was talking about with the quarterly summit and our monthly sync sessions, also finding that panels such as this with the combatant commands are also really helping build our relationships and helping us understand what each other are doing. So, we only have, sound bites, snapshots a moment of time with these other venues. But when we're doing these panels, we're talking before the panel, we're syncing, and then we actually do the panel, we get to hear even more from our fellow combatant commands. And I can tell you from where I sit, that's really helping feed down to our 06s and AOs of, hey, I'm hearing, Transcom is doing this. I'm hearing that CENTCOM is doing something. And so they are now really starting to work with each other. And I think in the mission partner environment, there's a lot more discussions going on because we have limited resources to deliver a very critical capability. And so, what's important for us is understanding each other's best practices. So I always say, I don't say this to my high schooler, by the way, but I always say in the Army, plagiarism is the best form of flattery. And so there is nobody's idea or concept that I am not willing to adopt and move forward if it is a best practice and it's already, moving down the road. There's no need to, try to invent something new. So that's how I would answer it, and I think these panels, the more we can do panels like this and have this type of dialogue, the better we'll get about, with sharing it across our combatant commands at the J6 level. I think at the combatant commander level, there's a lot of sharing going on. Over.
I guess I would just add a little bit to that. We talk about, Denise just mentioned the combatant commander level. We have warfighter talks that are typically led by the 4-stars, but we have a lot of run up to that, a lot of prep to that, where we have opportunity to share, best practices amongst the COCOM. So that's one way that we do it in addition to what everybody else has already talked about. And another way we do it is we leverage talent. And what I mean by that is, for example, I have a reservist who works for me who we brought her on full-time orders. She lives in the local Omaha area, but she's really a SOCOM asset. So she's brought a lot of great ideas from SOCOM to the Stratcom enterprise, trying to help solve some of that. And one of my previous opportunities was working at Transcom. So I had great opportunity to better understand that mission set, understand where some of the people are in that mission set, some of the, the great big thinkers and those kinds of things. At Transcom in particular, very strong ties historically with NORAD, Northcom, and Stratcom. So that's still in there. Very strong ties, as you might know, between ourselves and Space Command and ourselves and Cyber Command, because both those missions used to be at Stratcom. So those are the kinds of ways that we leverage. We leverage a lot of relationships, both within the government community as well as some of our industry partners. Over.
Okay, great. Here's one that I'll offer up to one of you three, but I'm happy to take it. How does DISA and the combatant commands expect to leverage commercial IT as a service initiatives within DoD? Okay, here's what I would offer, especially because I should have just taken off the how does DISA and the combatant commands, did DISA part and just did the combatant commands. I will tell you, I'm a big proponent of commercial IT as a service. We have to be careful as we kind of move forward with this. And I know there's initiatives within the Air Force, there's initiatives within the Army, the Navy has the initiative already. I'll tell you, but there are other offerings that I think we really need to get after this in a more holistic look and in a faster pace. One of my comments as I've been walking through the making my rounds here within the organization is this thing called velocity of action, and really getting after where we can leverage commercial technologies. Why would the government develop something when there is something that's already out there from a commercial standpoint? Or why would we take something that's commercial and I'll say bastardize it to the point of it is a one-off or it's very unique just for the government? Very few times do I think that we should be doing that. And so I think there's as we kind of continue working with industry and continue pushing forward with the Air Force's risk reduction effort and the work with the Army, is how do we enable industry in their normal day-to-day operations and their normal day-to-day research and development, because industry has so much more research and development dollars available to produce the capabilities necessary, both from a commercial and from a department standpoint, that I think we've got to be able to leverage that and continue pushing forward from a department. So I'm a big proponent of how you leverage commercial IT. Okay. Any?
Sir, you want, I can add on to that if that's okay.
Sure.
So, and I'm also a big fan of IT as a service. And I think, one of the biggest takeaways for IT as a service and the advantage we get is not just the IRAD dollars that General Skinner was talking about, but it's the elasticity. So if we look at SATCOM as a service or infrastructure as a service, when a commercial provider is providing that, they are able to, what we call it, the elasticity. They're able to increase the bandwidth and increase the compute and the storage at a much greater speed than we're able to within the DoD with our systems. And then I'd also say, really, what's out there right now where we need help with and IT, where industry can help us is helping us integrate our data. We have all this data out here, different programs of records, but industry has been integrating data for years, and they've been able to leverage it as a knowledge base. And so, if we look at what we have at our hands, I don't like this analogy, but I'm going to use it. When we look at what we have in our hands with our mobile phone and the amount of data we're able to pull and correlate with the applications that we may have, we don't have that type of expertise in our force right now to really help us be able to integrate this data at the speed of decision making. And so that's another area where industry and IT as a service could be a benefit to the combatant commands and DoD.
If I could just add one other thought, leveraging IT as a service is, we at Stratcom really want to pursue that effort. But the challenge that we found is that there are great ideas for IT as a service, and I agree, we've got to get after data as a service as well. The challenge is, how do you transition from what you got today to that as a service capability, and how do you actually make that transition and get the right vendor to come in here and provide a holistic picture of what you have. So how can that be done? That's some engineering that we really could leverage. System of systems engineering is where we're really struggling as Stratcom. System of systems engineering from an IT perspective across all the systems and networks. We have a IT service provider here at Stratcom responsible for the O&M of our networks. But just the looking at the next generation, looking at those automation, orchestration, DevSecOps kinds of capabilities going forward, typically the IT service provider is not going to help you get there. That's where we need some industry to help us get to that next step of IT as a service. Over.
Okay, I think we have time for one more of the questions, and then we'll turn it back over to the panel members for a final thought. How important is automation to you in the combatant commands and the joint functions in accelerating decisions and processes to deliver combat capability to the warfighter? Michelle, would you like to be the first on that one?
Yes, sir. So I think for us, it's very important, and we are looking at exactly that. So for example, a lot of the work, when I mentioned our JD Pack, they do a lot of analytics, but they are doing a lot of work as well in artificial intelligence, machine learning, to automate a lot of the functions today that would be very manual and at echelon. So not just here at the headquarters, but really out in our components and all the organizations that comprise our components to actually conduct the mission. As you mentioned, we are also looking a little bit at the robotics and stuff. Just have had conversations with our J8 with things we're trying to do to, again, get the person out of doing some things that are that we really don't need a human to do, and get them focused on the things that are more important. So not very far along in the journey, but it's actually important, and actually things that we are looking at to implement, when we find the right area and it's mature enough for us to actually move out on.
Okay, great. I think what we'll do now is we got about 5 more minutes, so I'll turn it over to the panel members for about a minute of any final thoughts that they have, and we'll go in the same order. General Brown.
Hey, sir, thanks again for this opportunity. One thing I wanted to hit on, and you hit on it very briefly, in your opening comments, and I just want to hit on it in our closing comments, and it's a conversation we've had, and that is really about, diversity of experiences enhancing our ability to face, the change in adversarial threats. We've had that conversation several times, and we talk about diversity in force. I mean, and it's absolutely critical. And diversity of experience, is really that stepping stone of a diversity of thought. It's going to bring us, it brings us awareness of our culture, our social and economic and other assumptions. And I'll just add, to really prevail against an adversary, we really need to develop our collective insight into all the different ways that they might think, and they might get ahead of their strategies. So we talk about, the diversity of thought, and when we look at what the adversary is doing, they are constantly looking at new ways to be able to attack us. And therefore, we need that constant challenge of each other's thinking internally to better plan for everything they might throw at us. And so I'll just say in closing, when where the most complex problems are taking place, and our adversaries are constantly putting their creativity and diversity to use, when a problem has come, we also need people thinking about this from different angles. And we're only going to get that from that diversity of experience. Industry, academia, they bring unique thought and unique experience to the table. And so that partnership is absolutely critical to where we think outside the DoD, we think outside the military and the government, and we really start bringing in industry and academia to assist us as well. And that's all I have, sir.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Liz?
Just a couple thoughts. I think that, as we look at diversity, and I agree with everything that Denise just said, but the other thing, I think we need to look at is the fact that we corporately are going to be involved in joint integrated operation and effects in the future. So we absolutely have to be able to operate together. We've got to be integrated. We've got to have that diversity of thought, but yet that unity of effort that's going to allow us to be successful as a nation. And, our adversaries are certainly thinking a lot about that. Our adversaries have certainly looked at data integration, leveraging the power of data. Many of them are already far ahead of us, as in particular, some of those in the Pacific AOR. So we really need to take a look at that and make sure that we're going to be prepared and ready to go. We've got our tools prepared, and that we practice when we're not in a conflict, because you're going to perform like you practice in a conflict. And we have to be able to work together, and we have to have confidence in our IT and our cyber tools every day, 24/7, 365 going forward in order to be successful. And part of that is exactly what we're talking about today, the partnerships, not only amongst our DoD components, but also with our industry partners. And again, thanks again for the opportunity to participate today.
Michelle?
Yes, sir. I'll just wrap up again, thanking for the invitation to participate. I don't really have much to add to what the other panel members said. I think, one of this nation's strengths is our ability to work together, whether again from academia, the government, or the private sector. And I think we're doing, we just got to continue to focus on the tough problems that this nation faces in the day-to-day competition, so that we're ready if we ever get to the conflict stage.
Yes. So just final thought, and then Rich, I'll turn it back over to you. I think at the end of the day, there's a continual, I'll say, fight for the talent, right? Because it is the talent and the diversity of that talent that is going to be able to enable the department to go from where we're at today. Liz talked a little bit about the legacy systems and how do you get from legacy systems to state of the art or the current state of systems. And it's going to be those individuals. How do you get your handle on data and making sure that you're able to effectively leverage the data that is out there, all the data, right? General Brown mentioned there's the data everywhere, and how can you bring that together? General Hayward talked about the commercial industry and all their commercial partners, and how do you bring that together? I think there's greater harmony that we can get after when it comes to the department and the commercial world. And it's across the board of everything that we talked today. So I hope this gives industry some ideas to think about in supporting our combatant commands as they're at the front lines, both strategically and operationally, getting after the things that we need to do from a competition standpoint to potentially conflict. So Rich, I'll turn it back over to you. I think we've got about a minute left for you to end things.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. I want to say thanks on behalf of the chapter for your insights and experience, sharing your experiences with us today, but most especially your time. I know those first couple of weeks in the seat, the schedules are just jam-packed. Not that they aren't jam-packed for everybody at this point anyway, but we do appreciate you sharing your time with us today. As a couple people mentioned, the interchange is one of the key reasons that we do this, being able to see what each other are doing and learn from each other. And I agree with Michelle that that's definitely one of our strengths as a nation. As a token of our appreciation, we'll be mailing you and the panel members one of our embossed notebooks as a kind of a memento for your time today. And we always appreciate you having you here, and look forward to having you all back next year, hopefully in person, and we can continue to share those insights. So thank you again.
Thanks,
Okay.
panel member. Great job, and 2 thumbs up.
There you go. All right, so folks, at this point, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back at 10:30 with our next panel from our presenting sponsor, Deloitte. One line down in your agenda, so see you here in just a few minutes.